Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The crib rattled once, too quiet after I moved. Show me her face, my voice cracked, not soft. My mother-in-law's hands hovered, calm and stiff. I stepped closer, pulse hammering my skin. Something in her eyes told me to run. I'm Lena, 28, I wish I had moved sooner. I reached in and lifted my daughter, warm then slack. A tiny breath hit my wrist and faded. Called for help, I didn't look at her. Footsteps behind me answered with silence. I hit speaker and shouted our address. Her palm rose like a stop sign, polite, final. You don't understand, the whisper slid between us. I pressed 2 fingers under a small chin. I felt the world tip toward a cliff. The dispatcher talked steady, count, press, release. My fingers pressed and released, counting out beats. My mother-in-law stood by the door, blocking light. She watched my hands like a judge at work. Let me hold her, she said without blinking. I shifted my body and kept pressing. The air tasted metal, fear, regret, rage, sharp. She reached for the bundle, nails neat and patient. I jerked back and kept the rhythm tight. Sirens bloomed outside like a threat. Opened the door, I grabbed the handle and yanked. She didn't move, chin high, posture neat. You're hurting her, she glanced at my thumbs. I saw nothing in her face but certainty. I raised my voice and people answered downstairs. Keys scraped, boots thudded up the stairs fast. She stepped away but didn't step far enough. I angled past and shoved the door wide. 2 paramedics funneled in with clipped focus. I didn't let go until they made me. They counted breaths and traded glances, short, brutal. One reached for a vial and pressed a line. My mother-in-law folded her arms and watched. I wiped sweat on my sleeve and shook. Will she cry? I asked, hearing only static. A monitor beeped, slow and stubborn. The older medic checked pupils with a light. His jaw clenched, then relaxed, then clenched again. He adjusted something I couldn't see. I stared at my daughter's unmoving mouth. Who was here? The younger one scanned the room. She was. I tilted my head at the door. My mother-in-law's lips tightened into a careful smile. Let the professionals finish, she said with sweetness. The medic frowned and kept working anyway. My phone buzzed on the floor, unknown number. I ignored it and watched the chest rise. It rose once, then not enough, then less. Stay with us, the older medic breathed. I gripped the bed rail until skin ached. A neighbor slipped into the hall, wide eyes. Do you need anything? He held his breath. My mother-in-law turned her shoulder toward him, wall. This is family business, smooth, almost gentle. The neighbor looked at me, not her. The older medic shook his head, small, heavy. The other turned off a machine and swallowed. Time, he said quietly, writing numbers down. Sound drained from the room in one pull. My mother-in-law exhaled like something completed. I staggered back and caught the dresser edge. She stepped forward, palms open as if soothing. Girls bring sorrow, she murmured, eyes bright. The word girls hit like a shove. I tasted blood and bit down hard. Don't touch her, my voice came out flat. She paused, then adjusted her sleeve with care. Some mistakes require correction, she breathed near my ear. Her breath stayed cold even with the heat. I understood the sirens had come too late. An officer filled the doorway, sharp uniform, steady. Everyone stay where you are, his tone cut. My mother-in-law smiled for him, soft, gracious. I lifted my hands and pointed without speaking. He saw my wrists and the shaking didn't stop. Who handled the child? He wrote as he asked. I did, then the medics, my throat scraped. She assisted earlier, I forced out between breaths. Her head tilted a fraction like I lied. The officer's eyes tracked that tiny tilt. Step into the hallway, he gestured her out. She glided past me without a brush. I watched her glance at the crib once. The glance had pride, quiet and clean. My knees wanted to fold under the weight. I followed the officer, hands still raised. The neighbor hugged his elbows and kept distance. Down the hall, my husband appeared shocked and white. He looked at my face, then away fast. I felt a door open that wouldn't close. "Where is she?" His whisper broke on the carpet. I stared at his shoes and said nothing. My mother-in-law turned to him and smiled. "It's handled," 2 words, no tremor. He swayed like a rope cut loose. Another officer arrived with a small paper bag. "Found this in her purse," he said evenly. My stomach flipped before I saw the label. My mother-in-law's fingers smoothed her hair once. I understood the first siren had been prophecy. The seal snapped and a fine dust rose. A gloved hand waved me back, firm and quick. He dipped a strip and watched it darken. His jaw set and the room tightened around us. I knew something irreversible. He had touched my child. "Where did this come from?" Clipboard ready, pen steady. Her handbag, I pointed, knuckles white on air. Across the hall, she adjusted her cuff slowly. "Old tonic," she murmured, eyes flat and bright. My mouth dried and the officer marked that word. They led her to the dining table. I stayed near, fingers locked under my arms. "Empty your pockets," the taller one instructed. She placed 2 sachets and a folded napkin. He unfolded it and revealed powder again. "Who handled these?" He looked at me, then her. I touched nothing, my voice didn't shake this time. She met my gaze with a careful smile. "You panicked too easily," her tone praised and cut. The strip on the table turned almost black. Another uniform entered with a body cam unit. "We need a timeline," he started, crisp and measured. "Start with your arrival." He didn't blink once. I counted backwards through sounds, not minutes. He nodded when I reached the silence after breaths. Any earlier arguments? His question felt like a trap. "We disagreed about choices," I answered, too precise. Her head tilted, just a sliver of doubt. "Disagreed, yes," she echoed, smoothing invisible lint. The camera caught that small rehearsal of innocence. A tech swept the crib rail with tape. He pressed the strip onto a card and labeled it. He moved to the changing mat and checked seams. He paused at a wrinkle and bagged it. My throat clenched and I tasted a raw scream. My husband leaned on the doorframe without stepping in. "Can I hold her?" he whispered toward the room. A paramedic blocked the path with an open palm. "Not now, gentle professional, final." He stared at the floor and nodded slow. They separated us into different corners. One detective sat across and set a recorder. "Speak in short sentences," he advised, neutral and calm. I stared at the red light and complied. Words came out clipped like pieces of broken glass. "Did she feed the baby today?" Another direct thrust. "She insisted earlier," I answered, pulse heavy and loud. "What did she prepare?" The pen hovered midair. A bottle from her bag, I forced through tight teeth. He circled bag and looked past me at her. An officer returned holding her phone in a pouch. "We have consent," he announced, gaze sliding sideways. She folded her arms and lifted her chin. "Family business," she offered, sweet and orderly. The detective pressed play on a short voice note. "Let me correct the mistake," her voice came through. My husband's eyes flinched like he took a hit. My stomach flipped and then stayed frozen. The room waited for a denial that never came. The recorder waited too, steady and blinking. "Who taught you this remedy?" The question landed hard. "Elders," she replied, calm as a ritual. "Name them," the detective lined in slightly. She gazed past his ear, serene and unmoved. The silence grew teeth and gripped the table. A uniform knocked on the doorframe twice. Neighbor saw her empty something in the sink. Time of observation matched the lull between cries. I watched her wrists, not her smile this round. She touched her pulse like she was counting. They gathered us for a quick lineup of facts. "Substance preliminary is toxic," the tech reported. "Infant ingestion likely," the lead confirmed without flourish. Air fled my lungs and came back jagged. Her expression didn't change, and that froze me. "Turn around," the cuffs clicked with awful neatness. She extended her hands like offering a gift. My husband stepped forward and stopped at command. Don't, the detective's eyes didn't leave hers. She glanced at him and almost looked pleased. Do you understand your rights? Clear and methodical cadence. She nodded, then looked straight at me. Some women cannot carry legacy, soft as folded fabric. I stepped back before I reached for her throat. Two officers guided her through the doorway slow. They moved me to the kitchen for prints. I lifted palms and spread fingers for the ink. The tech worked fast and avoided my eyes. A plastic cup appeared and I drank without tasting. The swallow hurt like a small punishment. Your husband will give a statement now. I leaned against the fridge and counted breaths. Through the archway he faced a different recorder. Did she ever threaten the child? They asked him. His lips parted and closed once like a faulty hinge. Answer, the word landed like a coin on metal. He rubbed his temple and focused on the table. She warned about bloodlines, he finally muttered. The detective lifted a brow and pressed for detail. He nodded once and looked toward the hallway. An officer handed me a brochure and a card. Safe lodging tonight, he offered in a low tone. I tucked them in my pocket without looking. Do we need to leave now? I asked. Soon, he answered, checking a message that buzzed. The coroner's team arrived with a quiet stretcher. I pressed my palm to my daughter's tiny foot, a last act I could still claim without permission. My chest cracked and kept its shape anyway. I drew back because they had to move. As they passed, my husband reached for my sleeve. Please come home, he begged under his breath. I pulled free and he let his hand drop. You heard the recording, I reminded, voice like stone. He looked at the doorway where she had vanished. A detective returned with an evidence envelope. Lab will rush this, he said and secured it. We'll need you tomorrow for a full interview. I nodded once and asked for a copy number. He gave it and reminded me to keep it close. Downstairs, the neighbor waited by the stairwell. I'll testify, he offered, jaw tight and brave. I thanked him without words and kept moving. Outside, the sky pressed low and heavy over roofs. The patrol car door opened and I climbed in. As we pulled away, I looked back once. Curtains twitched in one window like a cheap curtain call. A silhouette stood still behind the glass pane. I knew whose posture could hold that stillness. A chill ran through me that wasn't from weather. At the station lobby, a woman approached with forms. We'll arrange a room and a ride, she said. Pack only what you must when escorted home. I pictured drawers and benches and nothing I wanted. I pictured a single blanket and a charger. Before we finished, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number flashed with a new voicemail badge. I stepped aside and pressed play with a thumb. A whisper filled my ear with practice and calm. Do not make this worse, our family can fix everything. I hit redial and lifted the phone to my ear. A male voice answered with velvet threats and careful pauses. Stop now, our elders will resolve this quietly. My throat tightened, yet I kept the line open. Who are you? I asked, already flagging the call. I walked straight to the desk and handed over the phone. The detective plugged it into a reader and nodded once. We'll trace that number, he said without ceremony. Keep answering unknown calls if you can. I breathed through the tremor and braced for more. Two officers escorted me home for a fast pickup. Keys turned and the hallway felt colder than before. Take identification and medication only, one instructed with clipped focus. I opened a drawer and reached past folded towels. My fingers brushed a stiff packet tucked too neatly. Hold that, the officer raised a palm and photographed it. He slid the packet into a labeled sleeve without comment. My stomach pitched while he dusted the drawer edges. He showed me faint residue on a swab. We'll rush this, he said, and the floor swayed. Footsteps sounded behind us and stopped at the doorway. My husband hovered there with a tight jaw. Please come with me, he whispered, eyes refusing contact. Not tonight, I answered, standing behind the kitchen chair. The officer shifted his stance and blocked the gap. A sedan slowed outside and lingered by the curb. The passenger window lowered just enough for a gaze. A woman watched the house and touched her ear. She lifted a phone and then drove on. I memorized the license digits and swallowed hard. I shoved documents into a tote and zipped it closed. A small framed photo stared up from the counter. I turned it face down and left it there. "Emergency order is available now," the officer reminded. I nodded because hesitation would cost me later. My screen lit with a stream of messages in characters. I opened one and saw a thread of instructions. "Forward to my email," the detective texted immediately. "Interpreter on call, send everything." I pressed share and watched the files leave. Back at the station, they guided me to interview 2. The detective sat across and pressed play on new audio. Her voice filled the room with chilling certainty and timing. Then he slid a receipt across the table stark. A purchase from a specialty shop matched the timestamp. A second monitor showed grainy footage from the same day. She approached a counter with controlled poise and exact cash. A clerk pointed at a product and nodded twice. The detective paused on her face as she paid. My skin went cold because there was no doubt. They switched to banking records pulled by emergency subpoena. A recent transfer from our account to her account. Amount large enough to stand out in a month. I looked at the wall until words formed. He moved that money, I managed, and the room pressed closer. They brought him in for a separate round upstairs. I watched through the narrow window as he fidgeted. "Was that payment for supplies?" the detective asked evenly. He rubbed his neck and stared at his shoes. I couldn't hear the answer, yet I read it. The clerk from the shop arrived with a small envelope. He set it down and unfolded a carbon copy. "Custom order," he explained while keeping his gaze down. He identified her without any coaxing or delay. I held the edge of my chair until knuckles whitened. A clerk from records hustled in with a form. "Sign for the protective order," she instructed, tapping boxes. I initialed where she pointed and dated the lines. "Arraignment tomorrow morning, judge assigned already." Her tone stayed brisk, but my knees wanted to buckle. They drove me to a secure shelter across town. The attendant checked my paperwork and buzzed us inside. "Keep your phone on and vibrate only." She handed me a temporary badge and a cot. I chose the bed closest to the door and waited. Sleep didn't come, but something else did instead. A block number flashed and I answered immediately. "Choose silence and we will cover expenses," a man whispered. I hit record and asked him to repeat it. Only breathing replied, then the line died. I forwarded the clip before my pulse settled. The detective wrote back with a single update. Her print on the bottle ring, confirmatory hits. My lungs emptied and filled again like a decision. I stared at the ceiling and planned the next blow. The bailiff called our case and I stood. Her shackles touched the floor with a soft scrape. She faced the bench like she owned the room. "Not guilty," her lawyer answered before anyone breathed. My palms burned against each other and I didn't blink. The prosecutor listed counts with crisp precision and weight. Endangering a child, administering a harmful substance, homicide. The judge watched her face for any flinch. Nothing moved except a slow breath through her nose. I clutched the order in my pocket and waited. "Bail request," the prosecutor stepped forward one square. "High flight risk, contacts abroad, recorded intimidation." He lifted a transcript and held it up. The judge skimmed, then lifted her gaze to us. "Who received this call?" she asked, voice even. I did. I lifted my hand and swallowed once. "Recording submitted last night," the prosecutor added, eyes on paper. Her attorney objected on cue, thin and quick. "Alleged threats are vague," he spread his fingers outward. The judge read again and her mouth tightened. "Bail is set with strict conditions," the judge ruled. "Surrender passport today, no contact, GPS monitor." Her eyes flicked toward me for the first time. The stare felt like a hand under my ribs. I held it until she looked away first. In the corridor, her relatives gathered like a wall. One stepped close and gripped my sleeve hard. "You break the line if you speak in court." A deputy slipped between us and eased him back. The grip mark throbbed and I memorized his face. My husband stood behind them, shoulders rounded and rigid. "Come outside with me," he urged under his breath. I kept my feet on the courthouse tile. "We need to talk where cameras aren't watching." The deputy stayed near until they drifted off. The detective met me by the elevator doors. "Lab rush came in at sunrise," he said. "Poison confirmed, trace on bottle cap and sink." He tapped a folder but didn't hand it over. "Preliminary only, but strong enough for today." "Any backlash overnight?" He glanced at my phone screen. "2 more blocked calls, 1 voicemail with money." "Good, keep everything," he replied, already moving again. "We'll add tampering and witness harassment by afternoon." The elevator opened and I almost stepped inside. "Wait," he held the door and lowered his voice. Her counsel filed a motion to suppress audio. "On what basis?" My throat scratched the question. "Cultural ritual, misunderstanding, family discipline." Anger split my tongue and tasted like metal. We sat for the next hearing in a smaller room. The judge leaned back and watched both tables carefully. Her lawyer painted her as pious and devoted. He called the packets herbs and the bottle medicine. The detective's jaw worked while he kept his stare forward. The clerk from the shop entered with a receipt. "Custom request picked up under her name," he stated. Her attorney tried to rattle him with rapid questions. The clerk pointed at the footage monitor without pausing. "She signed for it in front of me." The neighbor took the stand with steady breaths. He described the sink and the quick pour. Her lawyer tried to recast it as normal cleaning. The neighbor held his ground with precise times. The judge wrote notes and asked for the timestamp. My husband was called next and stepped up slowly. "Did your mother ever advocate for removal of the child?" Silence dragged until it scraped his throat raw. "She pushed for an outcome," he answered, voice thin. His parents stared at his back like burning coals. "Define outcome," the prosecutor didn't soften the word. "She wanted no daughter," he forced out finally. A gasp rolled through the second row and settled. Her attorney objected for prejudice and theatrics. The judge overruled and wrote 1 more line. During a recess, I sat by the vending machine. The shelter advocate passed me water without commentary. "You're doing. Gee, the hard thing, keep your center." I nodded and stared at the cap's thread. My hand steadied while my chest still shook. Back in the courtroom, the detective introduced new prints. A latent lifted from the bottle ring matched her. Another partial on the crib rail placed her clothes. Her lawyer argued contamination and household transfer. The judge asked for chain of custody, point by point. They called me last for the afternoon slot. "Describe what you heard in your kitchen yesterday." I spoke in short lines and left out opinion. "Repeat the voicemail language exactly," the prosecutor asked. I quoted the whisper and lifted my chin. Her attorney tried to redirect with insinuations and smiles. "Is it possible you misheard because of grief?" I raised my eyes and held his gaze steady. "I recorded it," I answered, and the room hushed. He paused, then moved to another sheet too quickly. As I stepped down, her gaze caught mine again. A tiny curl at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't triumph, it was commitment to a cause. The message was clear as a knife point under fabric. This would not end with one order stamped. Outside, a reporter shoved a microphone toward my face. "Do you blame your husband?" she asked without blinking. I stared past her at the courthouse pillars. "Blame is for juries," I said and kept walking. Behind me, cameras clicked like teeth in the dark. A patrol unit paced us to the lot in silence. The detective's text landed as the engine started. "Motion denied, audio comes in, monitor fitted tonight." Relief flickered, then dimmed under a heavier weight. I knew pressure would shift, not disappear. At the shelter gate, the attendant checked my badge. "You have a call waiting with the advocate." She handed me the handset and stepped aside. New hearing set for a no-contact violation, the advocate said. Her cousin tried to reach you by proxy. I closed my eyes and pictured tomorrow's corridor fights. I pictured a door that locks from my side. Then I pictured a courtroom where I did not flinch. I hung up and pressed both hands to my ribs. I understood my spine had to harden again. The elevator doors opened and a folded note slid in. No one stood there when I stepped forward. I kicked the paper to the wall and used my shoe. 4 words stared up: drop charges by Friday. I felt my back straighten like a blade. I walked the message to security with my phone recording. Camera 9 caught a hand, the guard muttered, rewinding. A wristwatch flashed, then a sleeve with stitched initials. He froze the frame and zoomed until pixels bled. I recognized the letters and tasted old dread. Outside the courthouse, a rideshare halted before I waved. The driver leaned over and whispered my first name. My legs locked and I stepped away slowly. He tapped the door twice like a signal. 2 officers approached from opposite sides and logged his plates. At the precinct, a tech matched the watch to a cousin. The detective filed another violation without blinking. We add stalking and obstruction, paper goes up today. He slid a pen toward me for a fresh statement. I signed while my pulse hammered for more trouble. My phone buzzed with a new attachment from records. Bank screenshots showed a one-time code pushed to his number. Minutes later, a transfer landed in her account clean. Was he with you then? The detective asked, eyes steady. No, I answered, and the timeline tightened like a knot. A funeral coordinator called and offered a quiet slot. Can we guarantee no interference? I asked, voice flat. We can post 2 marshals, she replied after a pause. Use 4, I said, and she swallowed the cost. I understood peace needed a guard now. On the morning drive, the car behind us refused distance. It mirrored every lane shift like a bad echo. I read the mirror and lifted my phone camera. The plate matched yesterday's sedan with 2 digits reversed. I called it in and patrol units boxed it. The passenger rolled down his window and started pleading. Misunderstanding, we just want to talk privately. A cruiser door opened and ended that performance. They found a burner hidden under the seat cover. My chest eased, then braced for the next attempt. At the service room, the coordinator met me at the door. She nodded toward 2 ushers and a plainclothes pair. I kept my eyes on the front and breathed once. Footsteps clustered behind us and then stalled at the threshold. The deputies turned shoulders and blocked the way hard. His parents arrived and tried to step around the line. 5 minutes, his father demanded, both hands raised. I stared at the clock and said nothing. A marshal lifted a restraining order and pointed to signatures. They retreated 2 steps, then stayed like anchors. After the prayer, my husband tried a soft approach. We can grieve together, he ventured, fingers shaking. My answer came out steady because I chose it. Not while you. Hide your part, I said, eyes clear. He flinched and the room heard it land. Back at the station, the interpreter sat with a stack. Chats popped on screen with coded phrases and nicknames. One line translated to cleanse the branch before winter. Another mapped dates to deliveries and quiet pickups. The pattern locked in like teeth around truth. A courier arrived with a padded envelope and a grin. For you from an aunt, he announced too loudly. The detective opened it with gloved care and caution. Inside lay a charm and a typed list of rules. Halfway down, a line ordered me to refuse autopsy. We traced the sender, the detective murmured and texted. A squad rolled to the return address without delay. Within an hour, they sent back photos and tags. Kitchen table mixing spoon, calendar with marks around birthdays. My jaw clenched as a fresh warrant went out. Evening brought a call from the prosecutor's office. Grand jury moves next week, her voice carried resolve. We'll subpoena the shop owner for live testimony. Do it, I answered, and I didn't look away. She paused, then warned the pushback would intensify. At the shelter, a staffer handed me a sealed packet. Family attorney requested a meeting off record. I laughed once and passed the envelope to the detective. Inside sat a non-disclosure draft and a travel itinerary. A business class ticket dated for the night of bail. I filed for divorce in the morning without ceremony. I listed harassment and collaboration with documented proof. The clerk stamped the forms while never lifting her gaze. I walked out lighter and sharper at the same time. That mix felt like armor I had earned. As I crossed the plaza, a stranger rose from a bench. "Stop chasing headlines," he advised, eyes too calm. I kept moving until he matched my pace. He slipped a card toward my elbow and smiled thinly. A patrol officer jogged over and asked for identification. They cuffed him after the card revealed a threat code. His phone chimed and a group chat flashed open. Dozens of numbers, many with country flags and emojis. Screenshots of me, schedules, courtroom times, shelter doors. The detective breathed out once and added conspiracy to the stack. I ended the day at a steel table with forms. "Victim impact statement for arraignment," the advocate said quietly. I wrote one page in clipped lines and hard facts. Each sentence carried weight I could lift without shaking. At the bottom, I left room for one more line. Before I signed, my screen lit with a fresh voicemail. I tapped play and listened without blinking once. Her voice flowed steady, almost tender, almost sweet. "Legacy demands courage, deny the doctors tomorrow." I saved the message, then added my final sentence. The subpoena arrived at dawn and I dressed fast. Outside, an unmarked car idled with 2 officers inside. "Grand jury first," one nodded, hand on the door. I climbed in and counted breaths to keep steady. Today would carve the line I could not erase. At the courthouse entrance, a marshal checked my badge. A woman from the prosecutor's team waved me over. "Short questions, direct answers, no speculation," she reminded. I repeated the rule until it felt like bone. Then the elevator opened and I walked forward. The 4 persons swore me in and stared straight ahead. I told them about the bottle and the powder. I told them about the message offering hush money. Pens moved in tight strokes while I kept my chin up. Then the audio clip played and nobody looked away. They dismissed me to the hallway with the advocate. Through the door, we heard a chair scrape hard. Another witness entered, voice low and halting at first. The clerk from the shop identified her again. I held the rail and waited for the next name. They called my husband after a long shuffle of papers. He stood there, hands clasped like he was praying. "I transferred funds on her request," he admitted finally. My stomach dropped, but my spine stayed straight. He added dates and the room wrote quickly. When it ended, the prosecutor leaned close in the hall. "True bill on all counts," she said without flourish. "Arrest warrant updates to remand now." Air moved again, but not like relief. It moved like the start of the last round. Downstairs, a deputy fast-walked toward the exit. "Brace," he warned, touching his earpiece once. Outside, a crowd gathered with signs and phones up. Her relatives formed a wedge and tried to rush me. The line of officers closed and held firm. A voice rose above the noise like a blade. "Shame on you for betraying blood," someone shouted. I stepped behind a barricade and met that glare. The detective pointed to a man with a wristwatch. Cuffs clicked and the shouting turned into buzzing. They moved me through a service corridor to the garage. In the car, the prosecutor called the holding unit. "Remove ankle monitor, place in isolation, no calls." Her list sounded like a ska. F-fold being built. I watched the city slide by and felt the cut deepen. At the station, they sat me in a small room. "For-trial tomorrow, you'll give impact under oath," she said. "Keep it tight, push for no bail." I nodded once and asked for paper. The advocate placed a pen in my palm. I wrote in short lines and clean facts. I wrote about the hands at the crib. I wrote about the whisper that promised correction. Every line ended where I could still stand. When I finished, I dated it and folded it. Evening dropped and the shelter phones went dark. An officer walked in with a printed alert. Contraband found in her cell during intake, he reported. A note tucked in a shoe with a number. Instruction to contact someone abroad if charges stayed. They brought my husband in for a final interview. I took a seat across the glass and waited. You can still tell the whole truth, I said. He pressed his forehead to the partition and trembled. I gave her the code. He breathed and broke. The detective recorded the statement and paused the tape. Assist us now, he urged, eyes level and steady. Wear a wire for one meeting with the cousin. My husband stared at the floor and nodded once. That nod might save me or sink him. The meet took place in a park near the river. I watched from a van and gripped the armrest. The cousin arrived with a bag and a careful smile. Leave the country and none of this follows, he offered. My husband kept him talking while the team closed in. They swarmed and pulled the bag open on the bench. Passports, cash, a plane voucher dated for midnight. The cousin tried to bolt and tripped on the curb. Conspiracy and witness tampering, the sergeant called out. I exhaled once and let my shoulders drop. Trial began at 9 with heavy security inside. The judge reviewed the new arrests and the cell note. Remand without bail, she ruled in a level voice. Her lawyer asked for house detention and was denied. A clock ticked somewhere and nobody moved. My turn came without warning or build-up. Speak, the judge looked at me and waited. I read my statement with a steady rhythm. I finished with the last line I had saved. Her life mattered stopped them from erasing it. Silence held for a beat that stretched like wire. The judge met my eyes and nodded once. Order stands, she said, and set the trial date. Her relatives whispered and were warned by deputies. I kept my gaze forward and did not blink. Outside, the reporter from before tried another question. Do you forgive anyone today? She asked, leaning in. I paused and let the words roll through me. Forgiveness follows truth, I answered and stepped away. The camera light dimmed and the sidewalk swallowed sound. At the shelter gate, the attendant waved me through. She pressed a note into my hand with care. Your room changed to a safer unit, she explained. I moved my few things in one slow trip. Then I sat on the new bed and listened. The phone buzzed with a final update from the prosecutor. Forensic talks completes tomorrow, jury selection scheduled. She thanked me for staying present through the storm. I closed my eyes and saw a tiny foot. I opened them and felt a new steel. Before sleep, I placed the statement under my pillow. I whispered my daughter's name once, clear and calm. I promised to finish this even if I stood alone. I turned off the light and kept my shoes ready. Some doors open with keys and some open with courage.